Hello, one and all, and welcome back to the RimWorld Gun Empire series. My good friends, I am ever so happy to see you here again today. Today, my friends, as every other day thus far, we have a lot to do, but the majority of the work that we're going to be doing throughout the beginning of this video is actually going to be construction and mining and things like that. So in other words, the beginning half here is going to be a little chill and whatnot. One of the first projects we're actually going to be doing is digging out something like a large tunnel here right next to our garage. As I've mentioned in the previous episodes, we do have some issues on occasion trying to get across the barricades and the barbed wire with our vehicles, so I thought a little tunnel with a large automatic garage door would be perfect. However, immediately after that was completed, I did realize that we were having a few teeny tiny issues with our power, so that means that it's time for us to begin building some more solar panels, which coincidentally, just as I had mentioned, are now going to be our primary source of power, since they're just so much more reliable than the wind turbines, of course. I guess they kinda already were our primary source of power since they were the only ones that we could actually count on, but now technically it is official because we've built many more of them compared to the wind turbines. Once those were finally completed, we would then begin working on batteries. We need to store a lot more power as we're constantly creating new production areas that suck up all that power, so we have to compensate. I mean, I will say it probably doesn't help our power situation, the fact that after smoothing our walls in the tunnel and building the floors, I also built a beautiful string of lights on both sides to light up the entire thing so we can see while we're driving. But hear me out, it was definitely necessary. Well, somewhat necessary. I mean, but damn, look at it. It does look really good, does it not? I'm actually genuinely very proud of this. These floor lamps are absolutely perfect for this exact scenario and situation. I want to try to use them more often in the future. At some point, I might even want to do something like a little highway through our territory, especially since we're building roads that will come right through here anyhow. I really like the broken asphalt as well. I just really like all of it. And as you'll be able to see here with the footage of our brand new Highwayman ACP vehicle that we built last episode, it all works perfectly as it should. I also like the fact that the tunnel is right here next to the garage in case we have to make some sort of daring escape or last minute escape if we're being overwhelmed or something to that effect, of course, by Outlanders, or if one of the factions decides to turn on us with their massive military. Now that we've completed the project of our large tunnel there, we can actually begin focusing on improving the internal sections of the base. Specifically, in this case, we ended up working on the prison cells. The reason being, of course, as I'm sure most of you know, but just in case there is somebody watching who is not familiar with RimWorld or how it works, if you have a nice prison cell, there is a higher chance that your prisoner will join you because they'll actually have a mood buff. They'll be in a much better mood instead of some shabby ass hole in the wall that they really hate, and they hate you for putting them there, of course. After that was completed, we would actually begin working on a slave quarters down on the other section of the base not too far from the prison, because many prisoners that we actually take tend to be unwaveringly loyal to their home faction, meaning that we're going to have to make them be our friend by force. And of course, we don't want our enslaved workforce mingling with our prisoners, as they may end up giving them or end up getting from them some harebrained ideas like a revolt or something crazy like that that could end up getting them all killed. Regardless of their status in our colony and in our gun empire as an enslaved worker, though, we do want to give them the best that we have to offer to keep them happy and keep them from revolting. So we tried to make their bedrooms as nice as possible, just as nice as our actual colonist. Because damn it, unlike the RimWorld Marshal Service and a few of the factions from the Outlands that actually have enslaved workers, we actually somewhat respect ours. After taking a step back to kind of think about it and the placement of our storage rooms literally right next to our prisons, I began thinking that it may be better if we done something to kind of secure the prisons a bit more, so I ended up doing double walls and double doors on each side of the prison section, just kind of as a buffer between them and any of the weapons or anything that we may have in storage. And as you'll see why later on in the video, I am actually quite glad that I ended up doing this. Now, I know it's a bit ugly because these walls and doors are made of slate, but I actually done that on purpose. For you see, my friends, our colony here, our base, is forever expanding. It is actually becoming quite massive, especially with all the work that we're putting in early on in this episode. So with all the work that they're doing, eventually I'm going to start losing track of shit as I'm staring at it. So the black and the sandstone floor and stuff like that, the color differences, it's really going to help me remember exactly where the prison is when this base is just too massive to look over. Or, you know, I mean, that's the idea at least. I'm not exactly a master planner. I like to just kind of add things as they go. Sometimes, planning things out slightly, like different locations that I think would be good. For example, I'm not very good at planning because I put our storage rooms right next to the prison. That's probably a good example, but here is a new addition that I actually put in, which is a recreation room. And as you can see, they all very much love the poker table. But obviously, of course, we couldn't stop there. No. Our mercenary army and our enslaved workers only have the best of the best here. Not only would they be able to play some sweet-ass poker with their compadres, but they would also be able to bet their salaries on some billiards games if they really wanted to. I'm just kidding, I don't pay them, nor will I. To my surprise, the recreation room was one of the rooms that actually took the longest. We finally put the finishing touches on it with some smoothed walls as well as some sandstone flooring. And then some time later, something very surprising happened. We actually had our very first encounter with the Oak Foundation since we settled here. It was a very small group simply traveling through the area, and they were actually being led by the faction's leader, Lurkot. Obviously, of course, for any other faction, it's not surprising to see them travel through the area, though it would be to see their leader leading the group, of course. But for the Oak Foundation, they tend to be very secretive, almost like the CIA if we're comparing to the real world, of course. Except in this case, it's for the United Rebel Forces. Regardless, though, they didn't speak to us, they just traveled through the area. It almost seemed like they were scouting out the area, looking for something, though we weren't very sure as to what they would be looking for here. But in the end, we minded our business and they minded theirs, and to be honest, that's pretty well how we liked it, unless they were looking to buy some weapons, of course. After that, I decided that we would actually begin working on hydroponics as our current research. The reason for that, of course, is, as you've seen, we've been having some issues with our food supply as our population just continues to grow, and it's going to continue doing that, of course. And since our population is becoming somewhat unpredictable, except for the fact that we just know that we're going to keep getting new people, we do need a way to grow food through the winter, and hydroponics is the perfect way to do that. Now, a lot of you guys have been telling me I should grow mushrooms and stuff like that, and I do like that idea, but I just feel like if we're going to turn ourselves into a true warlord with something like a private army, we would probably want a way to grow something other than just mushrooms and stuff. But mushrooms are a good last-ditch effort or something if, it gets really hairy. Speaking of the shit hitting the fan and things getting ever so hairy, I've decided that we would upgrade our defenses just a little bit by adding some new sandbags in front of our barricades, and just as well we would also end up building a new turret on each side of our defenses. The turrets are pretty expensive in terms of steel and sandstone, but they only cost 3 components, so honestly, in my opinion, they're well worth it. And then finally, for the end of our construction, for the first half of the video here, I ended up digging out large sections in the mountain here so we can actually do our hydroponics basins. Now, of course, I'm not going to do those right away because they are extremely expensive in terms of resources that we would end up using for guns, armor, weapons in general, blah blah blah. Basically just things that we could sell for lots and lots of money instead of feeding our people, of course. But of course, I think all of the extensive work that we have done thus far will make for some wonderful new additions to our base. All the new rooms, the recreation items, the new prison stuff, just basically everything. The base is coming along very nicely. And I do think, of course, that all of these new additions have and will continue to make living under this massive mountain much more bearable day by day. And now, of course, that we finally completed most of the construction projects that I've planned out for today that I'd like to complete, it is time for us to do a little bit of mining. Not just any mining for any projects or anything, but mining of steel, because we need a lot of steel to continue producing all of our wonderful weapons and armor. Lucky enough for us, of course, there just so happens to be a few more veins of steel here and there across the map, but before too long we're going to have to start going outside of our own territory to collect it. However, as we were mining steel to make guns, we ended up having a gunsmith trader from the RimWorld Marshal Service come to try and buy some from us, which was spectacular. It appeared to be a very small trade caravan, and they were actually on horseback, most likely to try and not draw a lot of attention. Now, the reason I believe that they may have been doing that, they actually had a very special person among them. Among their ranks of the trade caravan, they actually had a defense minister known by the name of San. Now, this person was actually a defense minister for the RimWorld Marshal martial settlements, not just the service. This happens to be a militaristic and political office. And I want to give a quick shout out to our good friend X-Man9, who actually created all of these positions and ranks and whatnot for all of our factions in our Discord server, so thank you ever so much for that. Unfortunately for the defense minister, in some nearby hills there was someone lurking that we had no idea was even there. I see why they were scouting the area now. Good God. Well, it looks like they were lucky enough, most of them, not to die in the initial blast, but that blast did crack open an ancient danger, and now they're all getting shredded and burnt by mechanoids. And now it looks like they're coming to attack us. Great. I'm not really sure how these mechs are functioning because it looks like their masters are long gone, but I don't know. I do, however, have a sneaking suspicion that that large melting mech doesn't give a shit that its masters are dead, and it's more concerned with coming over here and crushing our bones into dust and then turning them into some sort of burnt liquid. But what do I know? Call me crazy. I did make a pretty dumb decision before I knew the true strength of this mech. I decided to try and send Richard in to use an anti-armor rocket launcher, and he did manage eventually to get a shot off, but he completely missed and got caught on fire, which really sucked. Thankfully, though, the mech was a lot more concerned with our turret, so Richard managed to hide below the ancient danger and begin trying to tend to his own wounds while everybody else came out trying to fight off the mech, but honestly this was all in vain and I was very scared for us. But then as I began to lose hope, I remembered that last episode we built a really kick-ass ACP vehicle. The only problem was I was still extremely inexperienced with my own mod pack, so I didn't know how to load up the gun, unfortunately, so I had an idea that I was just going to ram the damn thing. And shockingly, this actually worked. 100% it completely worked with very minimal damage except for the vehicle catching on fire, but don't worry, we'll put it out. Ooh, I don't even, and this is me genuinely, I am, was so excited when this happened, okay? I was so nervous that this thing was going to end up killing several of our colonists, and it didn't kill any of them. I was so scared, in fact, that I stopped playing, came back later that night to play because I just needed a break. As for the Mechmaster's corpses that were lying in the ancient danger, we're actually going to take those back home for safekeeping. Though their gear and whatnot is ancient and it appears to be non-functional and extremely damaged, the Marshal Service and the rebels like to use these for experiments and research and yada yada. As for the massive flamethrower siege monster mech thing, we're going to turn it into scrap metal, that way we can make some guns out of it, because shit on this damn thing. After that, I began making some ammo, which we didn't need, as you can see from my note for when I came back to do my narration. Note, we made ammo, but we didn't need it because the ACP used steel. Yes, like I said, I am extremely inexperienced with my very own mods, unfortunately. That's alright though. I like to learn as I go, and this was quite the learning experience for me because now I know that the ACP only used steel. Now, I would like to say that I put steel in it earlier thinking that's how the ammo worked, but I didn't realize that we needed to actually get a pawn inside and do a manual reload, which did work. So now this bad boy is gassed up, geared up, and ready to go, and we're gonna blast and smash some heads, in particular some emu and ostrich heads, I believe. Now look, I'm gonna be honest with you, I really enjoyed slaughtering these animals and hunting them down with the ACP. It was really cool, but they started to kind of try to attack us back, and of course they didn't go after the vehicle, they ended up going after a few of our people who were outside that I wasn't paying attention to. So I accidentally kind of maybe caused an emu and ostrich uprising that we had to quickly extinguish the flames of, but hey, we had fun. And even better, we actually figured out how to start shooting out of the ACP. Yeah, I keep calling it the ACP and the Highwayman, but I'm going to give it a name. I ended up naming it the Sand Viper, and I really like this name for the vehicle. However, friends, you and I both already know that I, with my tiny little rat knight rodent brain, didn't come up with this awesome name on my own. No, this was actually given to us in the comments of last video by our good friend Liam Hughes-NB9YX. who said, and I quote, "Name the APC something along the lines of Sand Viper or something snake adjacent," and so I did, and I now realize that throughout this entire video I've been saying ACP instead of APC. I'm sure you guys have already let me know in the comments. But of course, thank you once again to Liam for your amazing comment for the name, and thank you to everyone who commented a name. If you didn't get chosen this time, I'm sure we'll have plenty more vehicles to name in the future. You know, with the new name, I didn't really feel like it looked like a Sand Viper, so I decided that I would actually paint it to kind of match the amazing name, and I think it turned out pretty well. Not only does it match the name better, but now it will actually blend into its environment just like a real Sand Viper. But now with that issue taken care of, we would be able to deconstruct the ancient cryosleep caskets from the ancient danger, and that way we can get some steel and uranium from them. Or so that's what I thought before I accidentally had Scott get inside of one and take a quick little snooze. It's not very important, nor did you need to know about it, but I thought that it was funny that it happened. Ah, come on, Rat Knight, get your head on straight. You are a professional content creator. Sorry, guys. Anyhow, though, sometime later, we ended up having Richard work on a very special new product that we're going to be selling specifically to the RimWorld Marshal Service for many of their vehicles, maybe the United Rebel Forces as well. But this is actually a rocket platform modification kit. Essentially a modification kit for some of their vehicles to equip them with a rocket platform, and it's worth a lot of money, so we're going to load it as well as many other weapons and whatnot up into the old rifle runner, and we're going to go out and do a bit of trading. Now, something I can definitely foresee happening is making the modification kits, the pre-charged turrets, and things like that that they would be using to better equip their soldiers as well as their vehicle stuff, you know, for the actual war. I could see those becoming our top sellers at some point because they are worth a good bit of money. The modification kit that we've been talking about this whole time, for example, is worth about 950 silver, but because it is not a weapon, it doesn't get that full price thing from the mod that we installed, so we only ended up selling it for about 500 to 600 silver. And I mean, you know, that is still a good bit of silver. Of course, most weapons that we can build currently aren't worth that much silver on their own when we do trading. Anywho, though, after all our trading was said and done, I decided to try and continue making good on my promise to unite the settlements between this great divide in the mountains and where we live, of course. Which is just basically a fancy way of saying that I built another very long dirt road all the way to the closest rebel settlement. But of course, that is going to take a very, very long time to complete, so in the meantime, we're actually going to have Richard end up making some armor and or apparel for us. Specifically some gas mask, which was a recommendation in the comments by our good friend Ghost812SOV, and I totally agree with you. We really should make some gas masks, especially since we're always having acidic smog and whatnot here. Better safe than sorry, right? Especially when it comes down to the acidic smog, because it could end up rotting our lungs and killing our mercenaries before they even have a chance to fight. And hey, you know, while we're on the topic of possibly losing our lungs and maybe some body parts or something, it would be a really good idea if we ended up building a hospital. We really need to get a head start on that, so that's exactly what we began doing. Now, it would take quite a while as we were digging out this very large area. But I suppose while we're waiting on the new construction of our dirt highway, we had nothing but time on our hands anyhow. I wanted to mention as well real quick that I built this hospital really close to their bedrooms just in case something were to happen. If they're sleeping, I suppose they'll be really close to it. It may have been better to build it near the entrance though. After that though, Scott and Otto in the rifle runner were putting the finishing touches on our massive dirt highway that will cross the Great Divide of the Noquan Desert Mountains. I mean, even though this was just a dirt road, this was a monumental achievement, not only for us because this was a massive project that we decided to take on, but just for the planet overall. This is the closest that the two factions have come to being connected by a road in a very long time. Later on into the night, as the beautiful moon was in the sky shining down upon the desert sands, Scott and Otto finally arrived back home, and they immediately parked the truck in the garage and began unpacking all the silver and components and everything they had. Now that the two of them had finally arrived back home, we would begin trying to finish up our hospital. We could have of course done it without them, but Scott has the highest construction skill among all of our members here, so it really helps out when he's assigned to the project as well. I also want to specifically mention that I created an operating room as part of our little hospital here with 2 operating tables as well as a sink and a medicine cabinet. As the name entails, of course, this room is specifically for operations, as the operating tables have a slightly higher success chance than normal beds, and believe me, we are going to need it because many of our members here, as you can see, are actually missing body parts or have very mangled body parts that should be replaced in the future by prosthetics or maybe even bionics. Later into the night though, I realized that we had yet another raid, and it looks like they're sitting around planning their attack. This is no ordinary faction though, this is some type of gang or mafia from the Outlands. I don't know their name actually, the only thing that I'm familiar with is their logo. Maybe you guys could leave a name for them in the comments section if you would like, and I'll choose the best one. Regardless of what they're called though, they appear to maybe be some type of biker gang. Looks like they take great pride in their red dirt bikes that they rode in on. Now you might be wondering to yourself, why would this gang even have any interest in the gun empire here? Well, that is a very good question. Allow me to explain. You see, Scott here actually has a huge lump sum of gambling debt to many different gangs and people and things like that. So my best guess is he owes them a lot of money. But you know, I mean, if that's all they want, maybe we could all just load up here into the Sand Viper and go out and just kind of have a conversation with them, right? Maybe we could reason with them. Maybe they could even become a customer of ours. I'm sure these fine gents and lads would love some guns. Well, we went out and they didn't feel like talking, so we immediately began firing at them. Ah, what a shame. I had really hoped that we could work out our differences. They were really bombarding us with bullets, and one of the bullets, just lucky enough for them, ended up hitting our fuel tank, so we had to run off. We had just barely managed to pull the Sand Viper back into the walls of our base before it ran out of fuel, and it would be decommissioned for a short period of time, and we're going to have to battle on foot from here on out. Thankfully, as our men were arriving at the battlefield, our turrets had already pulled a lot of the weight for us. One of them ended up getting destroyed, unfortunately, but the other was still going. But now that all of our members have arrived upon the battlefield, we are raining down a Hail Mary of bullets upon the gang members, and after some time of doing so, they would end up attempting to flee. Though I will say this attempt by most of the members was extremely futile as we blasted them into oblivion, although in the end a few of them, around about 3 I believe, ended up escaping the area unfortunately. But now finally, with the threat neutralized, we would actually end up taking 2 of the raiders as prisoners because they had some pretty good stats, and one of them really sucked ass, so we would end up just stabbing him to death. These 2 on the other hand though, I believe will make excellent additions to our gun empire. We brought them both into their prison cells and immediately began tending to them so that they wouldn't bleed to death. The one on the left here is a Thromboian fella by the name of Machu, who actually has a really good cooking skill and also has a burning passion for it, as well as a burning passion for animals. Unfortunately, he does have unwavering loyalty though, so he's not going to be recruitable, but that is okay because we can still enslave him. Then finally, here on the right, we have an impid woman who goes by the name of Min, and her skills were pretty okay for the most part, except for her melee skill, which was very high with a burning passion, so she'll be an excellent addition to our mercenaries. Speaking of which, that does remind me that our Merc Mobile, the Sand Viper, needs its fuel tank repaired, otherwise we're not going to be using it anytime soon, so we had Shinichi as well as Richard start doing so. I would then end up choosing flak armor as our next research project. The reason being, of course, is because there are several different types of armors and apparel that come along with this research, like ballistic armors, flak armor, but the one that we're really concerned about that we want to try and give to our mercenaries is the combat armor, which also just so happens to be the exact same type of helmet that Shinichi is wearing at all times. It is very sturdy and also can take quite a hit. Speaking of which, Machu ended up going berserk and busting down the steel door of his prison cell, and Otto busted in with a shotgun, shooting him several times, and he also took one hell of a hit with his flak jacket taking some of the damage. Eventually though, he did finally go down and we would pick him up, take him back to his cell. This time around, we would not forget to strip him of his flak jacket so this doesn't happen again, or if it does, we'll be able to put him down much easier. Truthfully, I suppose we should actually be grateful the flak jacket stopped the first shotgun blast or so, otherwise he might have been dead and we wouldn't have an enslaved worker. Machu here is most likely going to be one of the most important enslaved workers that we end up having. As I mentioned earlier, he has a really good cooking skill, so we sent him to the warehouse to go ahead and equip his collar and straps, and immediately sent him to the kitchen afterwards so he could begin preparing meals for everyone. And by God almighty, Alrighty, let me tell you, he was pretty darn good at it. All he had to work with was corn, and he somehow turned that into a 4-course meal. Sometime later, I remembered that there were a bunch of dirt bikes that were left there by those biker gang members. I had completely forgotten about them, so I sent the little squad of mercenaries out to go ahead and destroy them, and we got some car parts out of them, as well as some steel and whatnot, which was pretty nice. Now, I will say though, I would have liked to have kept the dirt bikes for our colonist here, but unfortunately there was no way for me to claim them, and they continued to belong to that faction, so destroying them was the next best thing. And while we're on the topic of vehicles, I noticed that there are some automatic refueling pumps that we can use. Now, thankfully these refueling pumps didn't cost very much in terms of resources. They only costed about 80 steel and 2 components, so they were pretty affordable. Apparently they will automatically refuel any chem fuel powered vehicles standing on the interaction spot, which is very useful. They do need to be filled with chem fuel, however, which is not a big deal. We're already filling up the vehicles on their own, so it should be about the same. Now, of course, as we're building these, I want to give credit where credit is due. I believe it was the first episode, or maybe the second episode, our good friend here, AirSquawk7428, actually mentioned these refueling pumps, and I only just recently saw it, but I do want to give you credit for mentioning this to me. I very much appreciate it. So once again, of course, thank you ever so much for leaving the comment and mentioning this to me. I really appreciate all of you guys leaving comments. It really tremendously helps me out, especially when I'm still getting adjusted to certain mods that I'm not super familiar with. Now, of course, while we're still on the topic of chem fuel and comments from you guys, I've seen a few comments, of course, I'll put some on the screen here, where you guys are talking about me using corpses for chem fuel, and that's kind of a throwback for me to our Mining Empire series, where I actually did just that for the fuel for our helicopters and planes, I believe. I just wanted to stop and talk about it for a minute though, because it is of course something that I'm considering. The only issue is when butchering corpses and stuff like that, we end up getting the mood debuff, of course, for butchering human-like, and I think that that may end up being more trouble than what it's worth, unfortunately. But if we really need to, I may end up going down that route. And of course, there is the comment here about researching sweet vats, which allow me to make it out of rotten meat. We may not end up having butchered human-like mood debuff if I go that route. I'm not really sure. It's something I'll have to look into. In the meantime, though, I've also decided that I am going to try and build a central climate control unit for our hydroponics areas. I'm going to go ahead and get started on those as well. Since winter is here, I'd like to do a little bit of growing indoors to try and help out with our food supply. Essentially, this is just going to be a specific designated network of heat flow to our hydroponics areas. First, we're just starting with the one, of course. And it was actually around about this time I realized I didn't even need to research hydroponics. I mean, they're useful, sure, but we actually have tillable planter boxes, which is basically the exact same thing, except it doesn't require any electricity. I'm assuming most likely the hydroponics basins grow them a little bit faster, but you know, for it not to cost any power, the planter boxes are going to be phenomenal. And just as well, of course, something else that's phenomenal about using these over the hydroponics basins is we can actually make these out of stone. So all of the limestone and sandstone that we have saved up in storage that we've been cutting, we can use those instead of components and steel. It's awesome. I would end up going with a pretty generic, basic circle shape here on the outer walls in the hydroponics room. A little bit later on, I ended up adding a few more in there. I was just afraid that the pawns might not be able to walk over them or something like that, and it might cause some issues. So naturally, I was just trying to ensure that I didn't stuff this room to the absolute brim with these planter boxes where they would be in the way of everyone trying to walk through and plant more crops. Unfortunately, of course, it is going to take quite a while for the rice to grow, so for the time being, we're going to be supplementing our vegetables with a little bit of boomalope meat. Not exactly our best choice, as boomalope meat is noted to actually have a hint of chem fuel taste to it, but they were the only wildlife in the area. Later on in the night, we would actually begin tackling our largest research project yet, geothermal power. Yes, we are indeed going to tackle this beast, and we are going to finish it. It will take a very long time, though, of course. So in the meantime, while we're waiting on that to be completed so we can completely fix our power issues, we had Richard begin working on our very first set of combat armor. This is actually the heavy combat armor as well. It does also, of course, have a light armor counterpart, but for now we just made the one heavy armor, as it is actually pretty expensive in terms of plasteel. It requires some leather, normal steel, and about 20 or so plasteel. We would also end up making a frag grenade belt, because the belt and the armor is actually for Shinichi. It's kind of like a test, right? We want to give him this heavy combat armor armor, and if it does well, we may end up making some heavy or light armor for our other mercenaries. Not only is it functional and protective, it's also very useful. I think it'll be good to give him and the other mercenaries a very uniform look so these other factions will begin taking us very serious, not just a small-time gunsmith. I'm not sure how I feel about the frag grenade belt. It only gives him 8 grenades. He can throw them at any time while using any weapon, of course, but we do have to refuel it with an entirely new thing of frag grenades when, if we just use the grenades as normal, they don't run out. Not only was I glad, of course, that we could get Shinichi a uniform set of armor, but I was pretty glad that Richard ended up having a uniform set of steel armor. This looks so much better on him than a hideous jacket that he was wearing ever since his camouflage broke. He looked like he was in some pajamas, and I wasn't a big fan of it, but now this looks good. It really gives me that murderous scavenger Mad Max kind of vibes. But my friends, we are finally winding down to the end of the episode here. I truly do hope you have enjoyed this episode. I've had a lot of fun with this episode. I hope you guys don't mind all the building and whatnot that we done, especially in the beginning of the video there. I'm a big fan of doing the construction projects in RimWorld. A big part of the game for me that I find to be a lot of fun is expanding the base and building the base and stuff like that. I'm sure you guys probably don't mind, but I know a lot of you guys are here for a lot of the action and the actual gun trading and selling and creation and stuff. So if you didn't like it, I apologize, but I had a lot of fun doing it, so I hope that you did as well. But once again, guys, thank you ever so much for watching. I love you ever so much, and I hope to see you in the next one. Goodbye.